The Valorian Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and every species they met had learned the same lesson: bow down or be destroyed. There was no other choice. The Valorians were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. They stood 9 feet high and looked down on every other race in the galaxy. To them, other species were nothing more than slaves waiting to be claimed. High Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. Through the viewing screen, he watched a small blue planet grow larger. His scouts had found this world 3 months ago. The natives called it Earth. They called themselves humans. Zethral had studied the reports. These humans were a young species. They had only left their planet a few decades ago. Their technology was primitive. Their ships were slow. They had no real weapons. This would be an easy conquest. "Open a channel," Zethral ordered. His voice was deep and cold. "Let these creatures know their masters have arrived." On Earth, the message arrived at midnight. Every screen on the planet lit up with the same image. A gray-skinned alien with 4 arms and eyes like black holes stared at humanity. "People of Earth," the alien said, "I am High Commander Zethral of the Valorian Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. You will surrender your leaders. You will give us your resources. You will serve the Dominion for the rest of your days. This is not a request. You have 6 hours to respond. If you refuse, we will burn your cities to ash." The message ended. For a moment, the whole world was silent. Captain Danny Cole was sleeping when the alarm woke him. He was 43 years old with tired eyes and gray hair starting to show at his temples. He had spent 20 years in the military, fighting in wars he didn't believe in. Now he commanded the starship Resilience, Earth's newest and most powerful vessel. He reached the bridge in 4 minutes. His crew was already at their stations. Lieutenant Maria Santos looked up from her console with fear in her eyes. "Captain, you need to see this," she said. Danny watched the alien message play again. When it finished, he felt something strange. Not fear, not panic. Something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For years, Danny had wondered if humanity would ever grow up. They fought each other over land and money and ideas. They destroyed their own planet for profit. Maybe, he thought, they needed something bigger. Maybe they needed a common enemy. "How many ships do they have?" Danny asked. "Over 300 in our solar system," Maria reported. "More on the way." Danny nodded slowly. "And we have?" 47 combat-ready vessels. Another 30 in various stages of repair. The math was simple. They were outnumbered almost 10 to 1. By any logical measure, they should surrender. Any smart species would surrender. But humans had never been very good at being smart. In New York City, President Catherine Webb called an emergency meeting. She was 55 years old with silver hair and a face that had seen too many hard decisions. She had been a soldier before she was a politician. She understood what war meant. The generals and admirals filled the room. They showed her the numbers. 300 enemy ships. Unknown weapons technology. No way to win. Catherine listened to all of it. Then she stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was still. People had seen the message. They were waiting to learn their fate. "What do we know about these Valorians?" Catherine asked. General Harold Pike cleared his throat. "Not much, Madam President. They've conquered hundreds of worlds. No one has ever beaten them. Most species surrender within hours, and those who don't." Pike was quiet for a moment. "They're destroyed, completely." Catherine nodded. She had expected as much. She turned to face the room. "Here's what I know," she said. "I know that humanity has faced extinction before. Ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly ended us. And every single time, we survived. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest. We survived because we refused to give up. She walked back to the table and placed her hands flat on the surface. These aliens think we're like every other species they've met. They think we'll bow down and accept slavery. They think we'll give up without a fight. She paused. They're wrong. Admiral Grace Holloway spoke up. She was 60 years old with white hair and sharp eyes. Madam President, with respect, we cannot win this war. Not conventionally. Then we won't fight conventionally, Catherine replied. We'll fight the way humans have always fought when we're outnumbered. We'll be clever. We'll be vicious. We'll make them pay for every inch of ground they take. At 5 o'clock in the morning, with 1 hour left before the deadline, President Webb addressed the world. Every screen on Earth carried her image. People of Earth, she said, you have all seen the message from these invaders. They demand our surrender. They demand our slavery. They think we will kneel. She paused, and her eyes were hard. I have a message for High Commander Zithral and his Valorian Dominion. We will not surrender. We will not kneel. We will not serve. You want our world? Come and take it. The deadline passed. The Valorians did not wait. Their first attack hit the research station on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. 400 scientists and workers died in seconds. The explosion was visible from Earth. Captain Danny Cole watched it happen from the bridge of the Resilience. He felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, rage. All hands, he said into the shipwide cone. Battle stations. We are now at war. Across the solar system, 47 human ships powered up their engines and turned toward the enemy. They were outgunned and outnumbered. They had no hope of victory, but they had something the Valorians had never faced before. 10,000 years of human stubbornness. 100 generations of people who had looked death in the face and refused to blink. The Valorians had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never lost a war. They were about to learn what happened when they picked a fight with the wrong species. The first week of the war went badly for humanity. The Valorians pushed deep into the solar system. They destroyed the mining colonies on the asteroid belt. They bombed the settlements on the moon. Every day brought new reports of death and destruction. But something strange was happening. Something the Valorians had never seen before. The humans were not surrendering. High Commander Zethral stood in his war room and stared at the reports. His 4 hands were clenched into fists. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Explain this to me, he growled at his officers. We have destroyed their outer colonies. We have killed thousands of their people. Why do they continue to fight? None of his officers had an answer. In 12,000 years of conquest, they had never faced this problem. Every other species broke after the first attacks. They begged for mercy. They offered everything they had. The humans just got angrier. On Mars, the Valorians had landed 50,000 ground troops. They expected to take the human settlements in a matter of hours. Instead, they walked into a nightmare. Sergeant Pete Morrison was a big man from a small town in Montana. He had joined the Marines at 18 because he didn't know what else to do with his life. Now, at 32, he was leading what was left of the 3rd Orbital Marines through the tunnels beneath Olympus, Mons. The Valorians were bigger and stronger than humans. Their weapons were more powerful. Their armor was nearly impossible to pierce. In a straight fight, they would win every time. So Pete didn't give them straight fights. They're coming through the main tunnel, whispered Private Carlos Reyes. He was barely 20 years old, with shaking hands and wide eyes. This was his first real combat. How many? Pete asked. At least 50. Pete nodded. Good. Get to your position. Wait for my signal. The Valorians marched through the tunnel with their weapons ready. They moved in perfect formation, just like they had been trained. They expected the humans to be hiding in fear. The first explosion took out their front line. The second collapsed the tunnel behind them. Suddenly, 50 Valorian soldiers were trapped in the dark. With enemies they couldn't see, Pete and his Marines attacked from the shadows. They hit fast and hard, then disappeared before the Valorians could respond. They used knives and grenades and their bare hands. They fought dirty. They fought mean. When it was over, 43 Valorians were dead. The humans had lost 3. Fall back to the secondary position, Pete ordered. They'll send more. We'll be ready. This scene repeated itself across Mars. Every tunnel, every settlement, every piece of ground became a trap. The Valorians had superior numbers and firepower. The humans had 10,000 years of practice at being absolutely vicious. In space, the story was similar. Captain Danny Cole led a squadron of 12 ships against a Valorian supply convoy. The enemy had 40 vessels. By every measure, it should have been a massacre. Danny had other plans. All ships, cut your engines, he ordered. Go dark. Lieutenant Maria Santos looked at him like he was crazy. Sir? Trust me. The 12 human ships drifted silently through the asteroid field. They looked dead. Just more debris floating in space. The Valorian convoy passed within 100 kilometers without noticing them. Then Danny gave the order to attack. The humans came out of nowhere, striking from behind and below. They hit the convoy's fuel ships first, turning them into massive fireballs. Then they scattered before the Valorian warships could respond. They're trying to chase us, Maria reported. Let them, Danny said with a grim smile. Lead them to the mining station. The abandoned mining station had been rigged with every explosive the humans could find. When the Valorian ships got close, Danny sent the signal. The explosion was visible from Earth. Confirmed kills, Maria reported, her voice shaking with disbelief. 27 enemy vessels destroyed. Danny nodded. He didn't celebrate. There was no time for celebration. But for the first time since the war started, he allowed himself to hope. Across the galaxy, other species were watching. The Calvary were a small race with blue skin and large eyes. They had been slaves of the Dominion for 3,000 years. Every day, they worked in mines and factories, building ships and weapons for their masters. Ambassador Toleran was old, even by Calvary standards. He had served the Dominion his entire life. He had watched dozens of species get conquered. He had seen hope die 1,000 times. Now he was watching something different. Show me the latest reports, he said to his aide. The young Calvary pulled up the data. The humans have destroyed another convoy. They ambushed a ground force on Mars. They killed a Valorian commander. Toleran was silent for a long moment. How long has the war been going on? 3 weeks, and the humans are still fighting. Yes, Ambassador. Toleran leaned back in his chair. In 3,000 years, he had never seen anything like this. Species that fought back were supposed to be crushed within days. The Valorians were supposed to be invincible. Keep watching, he said quietly. I want to know everything that happens. On Earth, President Catherine Webb was meeting with her generals. The news was mixed. They were losing ground everywhere. Their ships were being destroyed faster than they could build new ones. By the numbers, they were losing the war, but the Valorians were losing something more important. They were losing soldiers. They were losing ships. They were losing time. They expected this to be over in a week, Admiral Grace Holloway said. Now they're stuck in a fight they don't understand. General Pike nodded. Their tactics are predictable. They do the same thing every time because it's always worked. They don't know how to adapt. Catherine studied the map of the solar system. Red dots marked Valorian positions. Blue dots marked human forces. There was a lot more red than blue. What do we need? She asked. Time, Grace said simply. Time to build more ships. Time to develop new weapons. Time to figure out how to beat them. Then that's what we'll give our people, Catherine said. We'll fight them in space. We'll fight them on every moon and asteroid. We'll make them pay for every step they take. And while they're bleeding, we'll be getting stronger. She stood up and looked at each person in the room. Passed the word to every commander. We're not trying to win battles. We're trying to survive. Stay alive. Keep fighting. And make them regret ever coming here. In his war room, High Commander Zethral received another report of human attacks. His fleet had lost 18 more ships. His ground forces on Mars were being slaughtered in the tunnels. For the first time in his very long life, Zethral felt something unfamiliar. It took him a moment to recognize it. Fear. What are these creatures? He whispered to himself. He would soon find out. 3 months had passed since the war began. The Valorians still held most of the outer solar system, but they were no longer advancing. For the first time in 12,000 years, the mighty Dominion was stuck. High Commander Zethral paced his bridge with growing frustration. His fleet had been reduced by nearly a third. His ground forces were dying in the hundreds every day. And still, the humans refused to break. We need reinforcements, he told his officers. Send word to the home fleet. I want every available ship here within the month. His second-in-command, a scarred warrior named Rothvalium, looked uncertain. Aye, Commander. Pulling ships from other sectors will leave our territories vulnerable. The subject races might. The subject races will do nothing, Zethral snapped. They are cowards. All of them. Now, do as I command. Rothvalium bowed and left to send the message. But as he walked through the ship, he passed by viewing screens showing footage from the war. Humans fighting in tunnels. Humans dying to protect their friends. Humans smiling as they charged into battle. For the first time, Rothvalium wondered if his commander was wrong. On Titan, the largest moon of Saturn, the Valorians had built their main forward base. 200 warships guarded it. 50,000 soldiers patrolled its corridors. It was supposed to be untouchable. Captain Danny Cole had other ideas. He stood in the briefing room of the Resilience with his senior officers. The holographic display showed Titan and the enemy fleet surrounding it. This is the target, Danny said. If we take out this base, we cut their supply line. They won't be able to maintain their fleet. Commander Laura Kim studied the display with narrow eyes. She was 29 years old and the best pilot in the fleet. Some said she was crazy. Others said she was the only one crazy enough to win. 200 ships, she said. And we have what, 50? 47, Danny corrected. But we're not going to fight all of them. He zoomed in on the Valorian command ship, a massive vessel at the center of the formation. Their fleet operates on a central command system. Every ship follows orders from this vessel. If we take it out, they lose coordination. And how do we get close enough to take it out? Asked Lieutenant Maria Santos. Danny smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. We give them something else to worry about. The Battle of Titan began at 0400 hours. The human fleet appeared at the edge of the moon's gravity well, engines blazing and weapons hot. The Valorians moved to intercept, just as Danny knew they would. What they didn't know was that Laura Kim and a small team of fighters had been hiding in the ice rings of Saturn for 3 days. All ships, engage, Danny ordered. Make a lot of noise. The human fleet charged directly at the Valorian formation. It looked like suicide. It was supposed to look like suicide. The Valorians took the bait, sending most of their ships forward to crush the human attack. Behind them, Laura Kim led her fighters through the chaos. 12 small ships, almost invisible against the backdrop of Saturn's rings. They slipped past the Valorian defenses like ghosts. "I have eyes on the command ship," Lavra reported. "It's big. Can you kill it?" Danny asked. "Watch me." Lavra pushed her fighter to maximum speed. The command ship's defenses opened fire, filling space with plasma bolts and missiles. 2 of her pilots died in the first 10 seconds. 3 more in the next 30. But Lavra kept flying. She dodged and weaved through the storm of fire, her hands moving faster than thought. Her fighter took hit after hit, pieces of hull flying off into space. Warning alarms screamed in her ears. She didn't care. The command ship's reactor core was exposed for just a moment as it maneuvered. Lavra saw her chance and took it. She fired every weapon she had directly into that weak point. The explosion was beautiful. The Valorian command ship broke apart in a ball of white fire. Around it, the other Valorian vessels suddenly stopped moving in formation. They had lost their coordination. They had lost their orders. They had lost. "All ships, attack!" Danny shouted. "Hit them while they're confused." The human fleet tore into the disorganized Valorians. Without central command, the enemy ships fought individually, getting in each other's way. Some tried to retreat. Some tried to fight. None of them knew what to do. The battle lasted 18 hours. When the sun rose over Titan, 147 Valorian ships were drifting wreckage. The human fleet had lost 23 vessels. It was the greatest victory in human history. Lara Kim was pulled from the debris field 4 hours after the battle ended. Her fighter had been destroyed, but she had ejected at the last moment. She was floating in space with a cracked helmet and a broken arm, but she was alive. "You're insane," Danny told her when she was brought aboard the Resilience. "Absolutely insane." Lavra grinned through her pain. "Did it work?" "Yeah, it worked." "Then I'm not insane. I'm a genius." Danny couldn't argue with that. Across the galaxy, news of the Battle of Titan spread like wildfire. The Kelvari watched in stunned silence. The Tauroth, a reptilian species that had been conquered 5,000 years ago, stopped working and gathered around screens. The Sindari, the Veth, the countless other subject races of the Dominion all heard the same impossible news. The humans had won. Ambassador Tolerant sat alone in his quarters, watching the footage again and again. He saw the human ships charging into certain death. He saw the pilot flying through impossible fire to destroy the command ship. He saw the Valorian fleet, the terror of the galaxy, falling apart. "They won," he whispered to himself. They actually won. Something stirred in his chest. Something he had not felt in 3,000 years. Hope. On Earth, President Catherine Webb addressed the planet. Behind her, the sky was clear and blue. For the first time in months, people were smiling. "Today, our forces achieved a great victory," she said. "The enemy base on Titan has been destroyed. Their fleet has been crippled. We have proven that they can be beaten." She paused, and her voice grew harder. "But this war is not over. The Valorians will send more ships. They will try again. And we must be ready. So I say to every person on Earth and beyond, do not rest. Do not celebrate for long. We have won a battle. Now we must win the war." In his damaged flagship, High Commander Zethral received the reports from Titan. His fleet was in ruins. His forward base was gone. His supply lines were cut, and somewhere across the galaxy, reinforcements were on their way. 500 more ships. Enough to crush the humans once and for all. Zethral smiled for the first time in months. The humans had won a battle, but the war was far from over. He would make them pay for every ship they had destroyed. He would burn their planet to ash. He would make an example of them that the galaxy would never forget, or so he thought. 6 months had passed since the war began. The Battle of Titan had changed everything. For the first time in 12,000 years, the galaxy was asking a question that had once been unthinkable. Could the Valorians actually lose? High Commander Zethral had retreated to the outer edges of the solar system to wait for his reinforcements. 500 fresh warships were on their way. When they arrived, he would have over 1,000 vessels under his command. More than enough to crush the humans. But until then, he had to wait. And waiting gave him time to think. "Show me the analysis of their tactics," he ordered his officers. The data appeared on his screen. Human ambush patterns, human weapon designs, human strategies. All of it was brutal and effective. All of it broke every rule of civilized warfare. "They fight without honor," Rathvalium observed. "They fight to win," Zethral replied quietly. "That is something different." On Earth, humanity was preparing for the final battle. Everyone knew the Valorians would return with a larger fleet. Everyone knew the next fight would decide the fate of the species. Admiral Grace Holloway stood in the war room, studying the latest intelligence reports. Her white hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her eyes were sharp despite weeks without proper sleep. "How long until their reinforcements arrive?" she asked. Commander Nick Bradley checked his console. "Best estimate is 3 weeks. Maybe 4. And our fleet? 212 ships, combat ready. Another 50 in repair." Grace did the math. Even with their new ships, they would be outnumbered 5-1. The Valorians would not make the same mistakes again. They would not underestimate humanity this time. "We need something else," she said. "Something they won't expect." That something came from Dr. Ben Turner. Ben was 51 years old, with messy gray hair and glasses that were always falling down his nose. He had spent his life studying physics and energy systems. When the war started, he was put in charge of weapons development. For 6 months, his team had been working on a secret project. Now it was finally ready. "It's called Project Sunfire," Ben explained to the gathered officers. "Based on Valorian technology we captured at Titan, combined with our own nuclear physics." He pulled up a holographic display showing a strange device. It looked like a sphere covered in glowing nodes. The Valorians use a central power network to run their ships. Everything is connected. Weapons, engines, life support. It's efficient, but it has a weakness. Captain Danny Cole leaned forward. "What kind of weakness?" "An electromagnetic pulse of the right frequency can shut down their entire system. Every ship within range goes dark. No weapons. No engines. No life support." The room was silent for a moment. Then Admiral Holloway spoke. "Range? About 1 million kilometers. Enough to catch their entire fleet if they're in tight formation. Side effects?" Ben hesitated. "It'll affect our ships too. We'll need to harden our systems to survive it. And the device itself, it's a one-shot weapon. After it fires, it's dead." Danny studied the device. "So we get one chance. We have to get close enough to hit their entire fleet, survive the blast ourselves, and then finish them off while they're helpless." "That's about right," Ben admitted. "Those are terrible odds." "Yes," Danny smiled. "I've had worse." While the humans prepared their secret weapon, something else was happening across the galaxy. The subject races of the Dominion were watching. They were listening. And some of them were starting to remember what it felt like to Hope. Ambassador Toleran of the Kelvari called a secret meeting of resistance leaders. They gathered in a hidden location, far from Valorian eyes. Representatives from a dozen species sat in a dark room, speaking in whispers. "The humans cannot win," said a Torath general. His scales were scarred from years of forced labor. "The Valorians are sending 1,000 ships. No one can defeat 1,000 ships." "The humans defeated 300, Toler replied. They did what no one has done in 12,000 years. They made the Dominion bleed, and they will be destroyed for it, the Taurus said. Just like every other species that fought back. Toleran was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice soft but firm. I have been a slave my entire life. My parents were slaves. Their parents were slaves. For 3,000 years, my people have served the Dominion because we believed there was no other choice. He looked around the room at the other resistance leaders. The humans have shown us that there is always a choice. We can die as slaves, or we can die as free people. I know which death I prefer. The room was silent. Then, one by one, the other leaders nodded. What do you propose? The Taurus general asked. Tall single quotes. Ren leaned forward. The Valorians are pulling ships from every sector to crush the humans. That means fewer guards, fewer patrols. Our moment is coming, and when that moment comes, Toleran smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in years. We show the Dominion that they should have been more careful about who they chose to enslave. Back on Earth, final preparations were underway. The Sunfire device was installed on the Resilience, now Admiral Danny Cole's flagship. Every ship in the fleet was being upgraded with hardened systems to survive the electromagnetic pulse. Commander Lara Kim, her arms still in a cast from Titan, refused to stay in the hospital. She was back in the cockpit of a new fighter, leading training exercises for the final battle. They're going to come at us with everything they have, she told her pilots. 1,000 ships. More firepower than we've ever seen. And we're going to beat them anyway. How? Asked a young pilot named Jenny Marsh. She was 19 years old, barely old enough to fly. Lara looked at her with steady eyes. Because we have to. Because if we don't, everyone we love dies. Because we're human, and humans don't know when to quit. Jenny nodded slowly. She was terrified. They all were. But looking at Lara, at the calm certainty in her eyes, she felt something else too. Faith. President Catherine Webb visited the fleet before the final battle. She walked through the ships, shaking hands with soldiers and sailors. She looked them in the eyes and thanked them for their service. When she reached the Resilience, she found Danny Cole on the bridge. Admiral, she said, how are your people? Danny looked out at the stars. Scared, determined, ready. And you? He was quiet for a moment. I've been a soldier my whole life. I fought in wars that didn't matter for people who didn't care. This is different. This matters. These people are fighting for their families, their homes, their future. He turned to face her. We're going to win, Madam President. I don't know how. I don't know what it will cost. But we're going to win. Catherine nodded. She wanted to say something inspiring, something that would go down in history. But looking at this tired, determined man, she found only simple words. Thank you, Admiral, for everything. She left the ship an hour later. As her shuttle flew back to Earth, she looked out at the fleet. 200 ships against 1,000. The last line of defense for humanity. In 3 weeks. The Valorians would arrive. In 3 weeks. The fate of the galaxy would be decided. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 500 Valorian warships were getting closer. The day of the final battle arrived on a quiet morning. Earth was peaceful. Birds sang. Children played. Most people tried not to think about what was happening far above their heads. In space, 1,000 Valorian warships emerged from faster-than-light travel. They formed a wall of metal and fire that stretched across the void. High Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Divine Judgment, and smiled. Today, he announced to his fleet, we end this. Today, humanity burns. Behind his armada, ships from a dozen subject races followed. The Kelvari, the Taurus, the Sindari, and others. They had been forced to send their vessels as support. Cannon fodder, really. Zethral did not care if they lived or died. Admiral Danny Cole watched the enemy fleet appear on his sensors. 1,000 ships against 200. The math was simple. The math was death. But Danny had never been very good at math. All ships. This is Admiral Cole, he said into the fleet-wide channel. You know why we're here. You know what we're fighting for. Behind us is Earth, our families, our homes, everything we love. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Valorians think we're weak. They think we'll break. They've conquered 1,000 worlds because everyone gave up before the fight really started. But we're not going to give up. We're going to show them what happens when you pick a fight with humanity. Across the fleet, men and women gripped their controls with white knuckles. They were terrified. They were ready. All ships, Danny ordered. Engage. The human fleet surged forward into the storm. The first hour was chaos. Valorian weapons tore through human ships. Explosions lit up the darkness. The Resilience shook as enemy fire struck her hull again and again. But the humans kept fighting. Commander Laura Kim led her fighters through the Valorian formation, causing havoc wherever she went. Her squadron had started with 50 pilots. Now there were 31. Now 23. Now 18. She didn't stop. Stay on my wing, she called to her remaining pilots. We just need to give the Admiral time. Time for what? Asked Jenny Marsh, her young voice crackling with static. Laura didn't answer. She didn't know. She just trusted that Danny had a plan. On the surface of Mars, Sergeant Pete Morrison watched the battle on a scratch screen. His Marines had been left behind to guard the planet. There was nothing they could do but watch. Come on, he whispered to himself. Come on. The Resilience pushed deeper into the Valorian formation. Enemy ships surrounded her on all sides. Her shields were failing. Her weapons were overheating. Half her crew was dead or wounded. Danny Cole stood on the bridge, blood running down his face from a cut on his forehead. Distance to the center of their formation? He asked. Lieutenant Maria Santos checked their console. 800,000 kilometers. Not close enough. Keep going. Sir, we won't survive much longer. We don't have to survive. We just have to get close enough. The Resilience pushed on. On his flagship, High Commander Zethral watched the human admiral's desperate charge with contempt. Fool, he said. Does he think he can fight his way through 1,000 ships? Should we concentrate fire on his vessel? Rathvolium asked. No, let him come. I want to destroy him myself. Zethral would regret that decision for the rest of his very short life. At 300,000 kilometers from the center of the Valorian fleet, Danny gave the order. Activate Sunfire. The device hummed to life. Energy built inside it, growing brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. Everyone brace for impact, Danny said. This is going to hurt. The pulse exploded outward in a wave of invisible energy. It passed through every ship within 1,000,000 kilometers. Human and Valorian alike. On the human ships, systems flickered and sparked, but the hardened electronics held. They were damaged but functional. On the Valorian ships, everything died. Lights went out. Weapons stopped firing. Engines fell silent. 1,000 warships became 1,000 floating tombs. High Commander Zethral stumbled in the sudden darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows across the bridge. What happened? He demanded. What did they do? Sir, Rathvolium said quietly, our systems are down. All of them. Every ship in the fleet. Zethral's blood turned to ice. Life support? Failing. For the first time in his life, Zethral understood what it felt like to be helpless. The human fleet regrouped. They were battered and bleeding. Less than 100 ships were still fully functional, but their enemies were drifting, powerless. All ships, Danny ordered, begin rescue operations. Target the command ships first. Disable any vessel that shows signs of recovery. But before the humans could move, something unexpected happened. The subject race ships, which had been hanging back during the battle, suddenly came to life. But they weren't attacking the humans. They were attacking the Valorians. On the Calvary flagship, Ambassador Toleran stood on the bridge with tears streaming down his face. All ships, he broadcast on an open channel. Today, we are slaves no more. Attack the Dominion. Attack for freedom. Attack for every generation that died in chains. Across the fleet, Tarath vessels opened fire on their former masters. Sindari ships rammed Valorian cruisers. Veth destroyers targeted the helpless enemy command ships in the span of an hour. The greatest military force in the galaxy was reduced to scrap metal. Lavra. Kim listened to the chaos on her radio with stunned disbelief. "Admiral, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," Danny replied. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I'm seeing it. The Battle of Sol was over. The Valorian Dominion was shattered. And across the galaxy, 100 enslaved species were rising up against their former masters. High Commander Zethral was captured alive. He was brought before Admiral Cole in a makeshift brig on the Resilience. How? Zethral demanded. How did you defeat us? Danny looked at the fallen commander for a long moment. Then he shrugged. We're human, he said simply. We don't know when to quit. 2 months later, representatives from 47 species gathered on Earth for the first Galactic Summit. The Valorian Dominion was finished. Their empire was dissolving as subject races declared independence. Ambassador Toleran addressed the assembly. His voice echoed through the Great Hall. For 12,000 years, the galaxy lived in fear. We believed resistance was impossible. We believed the Valorians were gods. He paused and looked at the human delegation. Then these people taught us something we had forgotten. Tyrants only have power when we accept their tyranny. He bowed his head toward Admiral Cole. You did not just save your world. You saved us all. Danny accepted the thanks with quiet grace. He was tired. He had lost so many friends, so many good people. The victory felt hollow sometimes, but looking out at the gathered aliens, at the hope in their eyes, he knew it had been worth it. President Catherine Webb closed the summit with a simple speech. We did not ask for this war. We did not want it. But when it came, we faced it together. Human and alien. Soldier and civilian. Young and old. She looked at the assembly with fierce pride. Let this be a lesson for the future. The strong do not always win. Sometimes the stubborn do. Sometimes the ones who refuse to surrender, who refuse to accept defeat, who keep fighting when all hope is lost. Sometimes they are the ones who change the galaxy. That night, there was celebration on Earth. People danced in the streets. Fireworks lit up the sky. For the first time in months, there was laughter instead of tears. Commander Laura Kim found Danny Cole standing alone on a balcony, looking up at the stars. You should be celebrating, she said. Danny smiled softly. I am, in my own way. What are you thinking about? He was quiet for a moment. I'm thinking about everyone we lost. And I'm thinking about what comes next. We're part of a bigger universe now. There will be new challenges, new threats, new wars, probably. Laura stood beside him. And we'll face them. Just like we faced this one. Danny nodded slowly. Yeah, we will. High above them, the stars shone bright and endless. A galaxy full of wonders and dangers and possibilities beyond imagining. The Valorians had made a mistake. When they came to Earth, they had expected easy prey. They had expected cowards. Instead, they found humanity. a species that had clawed its way out of caves, survived ice ages and plagues and wars, and spread across the stars through sheer stubborn refusal to die. The galaxy's most deadly force was not a weapon or a fleet. It was a species that would rather die than kneel. And now the galaxy knew it.